We are live. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Man, this is the fun part. So, like, this seriously, I was telling, we were talking just a few minutes ago. I was kind of giving everybody the, this is my little kid in me. Oh, Alfredo, you're back. See, I look it over and see who's tuning in. And of course, it starts with the names. And Alfredo, you're right there at the top, buddy. Man, I'm telling you, you're going to win an award. You're like on this thing every single week. We love it. That's fantastic. So glad to see all of you joining and tuning in. The only, if there is, obviously we've got to have this in the webinar format to maintain some kind of control, right? But otherwise, it would be great to be able to see all of your faces. Gary Worsham, got to see you. Glenn Culver, good to see you. Gathan Borden, my man. Gathan. Welcome. Glad you're here.
Gathan's a good friend. Hey, Gathan.
Jill Kilgore, so good to see you. In the right-hand column of the Zoom webinar, but we've got a great hour ahead. I've been looking forward to this one for a lot of different reasons, Becca. I know you and I, we've been in and out multiple times every week for the last several weeks, prepping for these things and trying to make each one better and stay connected with all of our friends in the industry. And I'm really excited to have Martin and Steve and Kylie all here. It is so great just to be able to see you guys, first of all, because I miss you. I miss being able to see your faces at different events and everything else. And so I'm glad you guys are all here today.
Likewise. Thanks everybody for being here.
Greetings from Visit Colorado Springs. Man, that would be a nice place to be right now.
Yeah.
Steve, I think that'd be the only place better than your barn.
Chandler's Landing.
Chandler's Landing. I love it. I love it. That's for those of you that are just tuning in. We got 117 of you now. Welcome. Glad you're here. We'll get started in just a second. But we were talking right before we began. Chandler was giving us the lay of the land, Steve, over his property, the Chandler's Landing. So excited for that. It's great to be better than a barn. Scott Eddy from Fort Lauderdale. Welcome, my friend. Glad to see you joining us today. Ruben, discovered Denton in the house. Yes, sir. Love it, love it, love it. Who else do we got? Wes, you're back again. Will, good to see you. Tim, Tom, Susan. Who else do we got in here? Anybody else see friends? Anybody see Rob Carnegie? My man.
Indiana.
Yeah.
Minneapolis, Portland, Ithaca. Lots of folks from different places today. That's awesome. Arizona.
Is that Florence, Alabama, Rob Carnegie?
Yeah, I think so, right?
Is there any other? My bad.
Correct, right? Is there any other Rob Carnegie? That's right. Greetings from Santa Claus, Indiana. Yes.
Sweet.
Been there. Holiday World. Got to make it.
Holiday World is legit.
Sandra Wilson from Horse Cave. I know her.
136 of you. Let's hi from Travel Portland, Kathy. Good to see you, Kathy. Thanks for tuning in. Fantastic. Well, why don't we kick us off here and let's get started. Becca, what's some housekeeping, some updates, catch us up, and then let's dive in.
All right, sounds like a good plan. Hi, everyone. Welcome. This is now our 6th marketing webinar from our Connect Travel series, Staying Connected. I'm Becca Smith. I'm the Senior Director of Marketing and Events for Connect Travel. Great seeing so many of you today. As you have questions, submit those to the Q&A portal. Also utilize the chat function for shout outs like you're doing. Any feedback, we welcome that. We'll do our best throughout the webinar to address all those questions and shout outs. As a reminder, you can view all of our upcoming webinars and everything that's on demand at connecttravel.com/webinars, well, connecttravel.com/webinars. And you can also connect with us on our YouTube page, Connect Travel. Our goal in hosting these is really just to keep everyone connected, build community, show support, encourage idea, share. So really appreciate you all being here and sharing your ideas. Another cool way to stay connected with us is through the travel vertical. If you haven't heard of that, you can visit thetravelvertical.com to subscribe, and also just contact us with any cool ideas that your destination or attraction or city is doing. And we love to include that in future weekly episodes of that. Once again, we welcome our savvy moderator, Josh Collins. Josh has worked with some of the coolest and most powerful and influential brands like Stevie Wonder, The Roots, John Legend, Jay-Z, and many others for nearly 20 years. Josh now takes his deep understanding of human behavior and creates experiences consumers crave while leading the vibrant Destination Accelerator team at Streetsense. And nice to see you again, Josh. Welcome back.
Yes, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here. This is always a highlight of my week. I have been, I'm sure, as many of you joining, you've sat in on many of these. You've probably participated in several yourself. And like I was saying earlier, this is just a lot of fun. It brings a lot of joy to see, not just to have my friends here join, but every week, new faces, and kind of reconnect and stay connected, you know, and which is why we've titled this way. So Martin, thank you for joining us this week. Glad you're here, my friend. Steve, Chandler as well, thank you. And Kylie, of course, so great to see you. You look amazing there, and I love that porch. I'm like seriously jealous. That looks like I would love to just sit there and read. All
You
day
are
long.
welcome anytime. You can bring all your books.
But I'm excited for this week, you know, as we are kind of thinking about what we should, you know, keep trying to figure out, you know, stay up to date, what's happening, what's any updates, right, that we can use and leverage and get better at what we're doing, the industry as a whole. But then we think about, you know, let's talk about branding, and let's think about, in light of, you know, COVID-19, this pandemic, there's always some incredible conversations at the events and tracks that we attend every year, especially Each Tourism Summit, around branding. And as Becca and I were thinking about this, you know, the people that immediately came to mind are the ones we invited here to the panel today. So I'm glad you guys are here. Steve, let's start with you. Why don't you just kind of give us an introduction, and then we'll kind of go around the horn. But where are you at, first of all? Because I love that barn.
Yeah, well, technically I'm in my office, but it has white walls in it, and we only have a two-person office, so we don't have a big accommodations. But that is my barn. It's just a photo of it in Franklin, Tennessee. So.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Well, thanks for being here, man. It's good to see you. For those of you that maybe don't know Steve, I mean, literally, I consider him a dear friend and one of the smartest branding guys on the planet, hands down. So it's an honor. Thank you for taking the time and being with us today, Steve. And Martin, I have loved getting to know you over the years, these last 6-7 years, and it's such a joy. You always make me laugh, man. So thank you for being here too. Where are you, and how are you doing these days?
As you can see, we have turned our office into a webinar studio because that's a better use of the real estate at the moment. So I'm in beautiful Portland, Oregon at the moment.
Ah, love that. The Pacific Northwest as a whole is just one of my favorite spots. So that's so cool. And Kylie, all the way from Tupelo, how are you? You're on your porch, it looks like, but how are you? What's the update there from Tupelo, Mississippi?
We are doing well, we're hunkered down, plugging along, making it happen, just getting right to it, trying to maintain.
I love it. And Becca, good to see you again. You are where?
Tallahassee, Florida.
Tallahassee, Florida, but in your...
I'm in my cat's room. That's embarrassing that they have their own room.
No, I was hoping you would do it. Yes. You're in your cat's room. I mean, of course, right? Because every cat needs their own room, right?
They're just crazy, so they need to be confined sometimes.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Well, let's dive in. As you guys are tuning in, you may or may not know, you may not be familiar, and certainly share any questions or add comments as things come up. You can put those in the chat feature directly or the Q&A. So feel free to use that, and we'll do our best to get to all of those. But, you know, obviously, why don't we start at the top? There are 174 of you on, so thank you for giving up your time and joining us today. But I certainly understand and can imagine we're probably represent all over the spectrum of ideas with regards to branding. What is branding? What are we talking about? That's certainly a common term, but what are we talking about, and what do we mean when we, for this next hour, are talking about branding? So, Steve, why don't you kick us off with that, and then we'll dive in.
Sure. What is branding? Did you throw out the big question out there?
The big question.
Yeah, you know, yes, 40 people what branding is, and they're going to give you 40 different answers, but you only ask me, so I get to give my answer. You know, I think for all of us on this call, destination branding is simply telling your story in a manner that stands out, to keep it really, really simple. You know, I think we all have bought in. We're all savvy enough to know that it's way more than a logo by now. I think we're all past that point. And I think maybe more than ever, because right now we've got to get our story out there, because everybody, it's going to be a race where everybody's going to be talking about outdoor space and natural assets, and we have waterfalls. And by the way, if you have those things, do it. Go right at it. But your brand is how you're going to stand out amidst everyone saying selling the same things. It's really, what is the one thing that really makes you stand out? And it's about the experiences that you deliver. But it's just having a unique story that can be woven from the restaurants that you walk in, the stores that you visit, the attractions that you visit. It's all kind of it's a story all brought in together. And I think we're all going to talk about, I'm looking forward to hearing some ideas of how do we talk about that story and apply it to what's the relevancy of the situation we're in. Yeah,
I mean, and I love that's a great place. You're absolutely right. Everybody's probably going to have slightly different answers, so I'm glad you kind of give us a little bit of the North Star we can kind of focus around, at least for this hour, which is really great. Kylie, part of one of the reasons why I'm so glad you're here clearly is because the Tupelo brand. I mean, very, very few of us on the call, right? I think if we're honest, has such a recognizable global destination brand. So such as you, that you get to steward. So maybe for those that aren't familiar, why don't you kind of introduce us to the brand that you steward and you know, what you're doing?
Yeah, well, thank you. First of all, thank you for this opportunity to join this elite panelist of speakers. Glad to talk about it. You know, Tupelo, Mississippi, if you're not familiar, is in terms of location, we're in Northeast Mississippi. So we're 90 minutes southeast of Memphis and 2 hours west of Birmingham. So we're really a central hub, but you know, our bread and butter is that we're the birthplace of Elvis Presley. And so we hang our hat on that. And we tout that, and that's not just domestically, but internationally, importantly. And so we really hang our hat on that, but we're proud of how Tupelo has grown in recent years. You know, having our restaurant scene take off, having our live music scene take off, and our events increase year over year. And so, yeah, you know, you talk about branding, what a unique time that we're in, where we were, you know, just targeting with our promotions to the consumer, you know, that we, and internationally too, come to Tupelo, we're the birthplace of Elvis. We have all these great attractions and events you can participate into. Now we've just shifted gears, right? So our story and our branding has shifted, or, you know, the term I hear often, pivoted to promoting those businesses, but putting safety first. And so that's kind of having these conversations with our current audience, with the newer audience, but it's interesting how that conversation has changed gears in light of what we're in right now. So so, you know, we love our brand. We touted of our brand essence that we're the center of positivity, so we keep that momentum going strong. We're just tweaking the language and the story to fit where we are now.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I've been very blessed to have traveled all over the world several times, and I can tell you firsthand, it's why I know your international reach clearly is because I have been in Japan, and the two things are very widely known in Japan are Jack Daniels and Elvis Presley. So it is a widely recognized brand, and you guys get to So what's interesting is you do attract a massive international audience, and everything we've been seeing thus far is kind of giving some clues that might shift to obviously the first thing we would expect more domestic travel, necessarily being able to rely on international, travel recovery. So how is that impacting how you're positioning the brand and maybe even some of the targeting, how you're thinking about that through those branded messages?
Yeah, we first and foremost, Tupelo, and as I alluded of our location, we are a drive market. And so I think in this current situation, that's something we're going to leverage because international travel, we don't know when that's going to shift gears and elevate itself back up to where we were. We do have a lot of domestic with regards to Elvis, but internationally, yeah, that's a big pull, and that's going to be a hit on us. So we're going to tout that during this time. We are, and for instance, our birthplace, Elvis Presley birthplace, remains closed. But you look at the demographic who goes to the birthplace, and that's that boomer 65 plus and that international. So we are going to look at, our continued focus, which is that drive market, and really try to recoup, visitation and occupancy and revenue that way, which we've always done, but we're just preparing for, that lack of international travel. We have a dedicated Jenny Bradford Curley. She is our PR director. She's also our international sales manager. So she's, in constant contact with our international contacts for when we are able, and that lift is for international travel is back to where it was. That'll be a while. She's in contact to push those messages of coming back to Tupelo.
Yeah, it's really good. Martin, I want to toss to you because one of the things I always appreciate from you is you have this uncanny ability to discover like the great examples of what people are doing, certainly internationally all over the world. But what are you seeing and what are you thinking about brand positioning for destinations right now that has you at least going, oh, that's really good, that's really cool, or oh, I'm paying attention to that. What are you seeing right now?
Oh, so many thoughts. So I think so when you look at a brand or branding, right, sort of it's what you try to put out there, but ultimately it's what are people thinking about you, because the perception that people have of your product is what creates the brand. And you don't necessarily have to have experienced the product to have an opinion about it. So if I take, two travel examples in the airline space, let's say Ryanair, you might not have flown Ryanair, but you probably have heard enough about to know how is Ryanair different than Emirates, right? So one being one that really nickels and dimes you and sort of gets a kick out of that and is very successful with that. And the other one, an airline that has showers in the first class, which shapes your perception of it, even if you never even come close to the first class. So that's sort of what people think about you, makes the brand. And the DMO space is a tricky one because a lot of DMOs compete on the same attributes, right? Sort of where every DMO will say, we have great restaurants and we have great nightlife and we have great hotels. And if you're on beach, you have great beaches and so on. So it's already hard enough to differentiate yourself in that space. Now, on top of it, sort of you look at the COVID-19 crisis, and now it gets really interesting because destinations traditionally have not had to compete or message around we are a safe place to visit because it was sort of a given. And now you look at research and suddenly that sits on the top of everybody's mind. And the question is sort of, are we going to see, a race between destinations to basically, how do you tell the story that I'm safe or maybe I'm safer than another place, and so on. So I think a lot of DMOs, as we move into the phase of reopening, I have to fight sort of on two fronts. On the one side, they have to work with local stakeholders and constituents and make sure there is some sort of uniform level in a destination and standards. And then, so that's already hard enough because DMOs are more talking to customers and not so much talking to stakeholders. And then on the other side, once you have that standard, you have to figure out a way to communicate that to visitors. And it's a very personal and touchy subject. So I think DMOs are in a tough spot with that.
Yeah, and you were talking on our prep call earlier, you brought up a really great point about just the divide we're seeing, right? With regards to positioning our brand in certain ways. Certainly there's a pretty massive political divide we all are privy to. I mean, it doesn't take, 30 seconds of scrolling on Facebook to see that, right? But but for a destination that might have neighboring areas, right, that it doesn't, maybe those neighboring states or neighboring areas aren't open or aren't ready to receive travel, but then maybe your particular destination is. How do you process, or how would you kind of consult that destination to think about their brand messaging and positioning themselves to be more receptive or ready to travel compared to their neighboring areas?
I'm happy to chime in on that one. Being, as I alluded to earlier, we are a job market. So we're ready for our neighboring states to visit Tupelo. I think it's what we, at the start of when we went into this purgatory of the unknown in travel, and prior to that, let me just say, we've sort of shifted gears from this destination marketing to destination management. And it's no better key than now, because we then became this support system for our local businesses, working closely with them more so than we have with our partners, but also just in the community. And so when we look at our neighboring states, if we start to get this influx of travel, I think as a DMO, what's important and valuable to the local community and businesses, but also that prospective visitor, is encouraging our businesses to really mitigate that by protecting their consumers and protecting their employees, and encouraging them to push out on their social media, on their TripAdvisor, on their website, the safety measures they're taking. It's not something we can, force upon them, but it's certainly something we encourage them, because we, like I said, we're a job market. We want those neighboring states to visit us. I mean, that's our goal, has been and will be, and even more so now. So, we're just working hand in hand closely, having weekly meetings, Zoom meetings with our partners, keeping them abreast on the phases of recovery through our recovery task force of here's where we are in this particular phase, particularly now as our businesses are starting to reopen. For instance, our restaurants are allowed to reopen at 50% capacity, but they have 19 requirements to meet per the governor's executive order in order to have that establishment open. Maintaining that distance, rearranging the restaurant, cleaning, all that. So some of our attractions are still closed, but we're opening up salons. And being that we are a regional hub, what I want to mention for Tupelo and what's unique is that we are regional. So we have the 4th largest non-metropolitan hospital. We have, people come here even from, say, for example, Hamilton, Alabama, to shop. We bring in a workforce, just all the things that you can do here. So we welcome that. We just encourage businesses to take the lead on providing that safety information as well.
It's a good, I love that you mentioned all that. And then how you are thinking about targeting those, just your transient, drive and where you can draw from too. And I have a feeling, Martin and Steve, I want to toss this to you guys. I have a feeling we're probably aligned on this with how we think about and what we would suggest to destinations and their branding. But if the need now becomes, well, I would say from what we've talked about, it's already here. The need to a destination to brand and be participating in the messages around cleanliness and safety and all these other things we've talked about. What advice would you give? How does a destination brand navigate the hurdles, politically speaking, around being maybe afraid to take a stance, you know what I mean? Afraid, which, as we know, then we end up all sounding the same because we're maybe afraid, and we tend to lose our voice through the messaging or through our campaigns we put out. That I'd love to, Steve, let's start with you, and then Martin, I'd love to hear from you too, just on how do we navigate that?
Yeah, I think some research that we've seen is showing that consumers, travelers want to hear from local and state destinations. Excuse me, my bad. Local and state governments. Those are the sources where they want to hear guidelines, reopenings, closings. They want to hear from those sources. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to like it, which is kind of the topic, really. Our advice has been to clients, because the consumers want to hear from the local governments and the state governments, anytime, because we're all passing along that information, as we should. That's our responsibility as a DMO. The responsibility that comes with being the voice of tourism in your destination means you have to share that pertinent information, but do not casually share it like a post, for example. Just, type it, officially share it. Give a link to their website, or make it look like an official announcement that's not coming from your organization. Don't be caught in the middle of that debate. You have a responsibility to provide the information. You're the messenger. That's it. And so I stay away from that. I think the social listening right now you're going to have to double down for everybody that's engaged in social listening, because the consumers are going to have expectations and demands that they don't even know about yet. And we can't treat our consumers the way we dealt with before, because we're targeting, we know who they are. You may think you know who you are, but they've changed too. And so we've got to listen, and especially when it comes to this topic that's going to be very divisive. Well, I don't like if you're going to make me wear a mask. I mean, that's the one we're all talking about, right? You're going to make me wear a mask. You all, DMOs, are in a situation of passing along the information, providing a list of that, and let the individual attraction and restaurant, let them take their own stance on it, would be my advice. Martin?
Yeah, I think so what we've done and what Josh alluded to is we are doing a lot of social listening, and basically have a tool that sucks in, up to, more than 5 million public posts a day around COVID-19. So we've been looking at this since January, when we had the first clients in Asia go through that. And one of the things that is now very clear, and we saw that starting about 3 weeks ago, is how the question on sort of, we call this health versus wealth, right? Sort of what's more important, the health or of the people in the country, or the wealth of the country, has become very, very political, obviously, and where wearing a face mask is now a political statement. And for DMOs, it's going to be tricky, because once you start messaging again that you are ready to welcome visitors, and that's assuming that all the local regulations allow, and you comply with them, obviously, and so on, there will still be people who will say this is an irresponsible thing to do. And what we see is obviously the divide, for lack of a better label, runs along the party lines. There's a research that came out yesterday. Republicans, people who lean Republican, are 3 times as likely to feel comfortable going to a restaurant in the next month than people who lean Democratic. And so one of the things that we internally are thinking about is, from a marketing perspective, to avoid this backlash when you put content out there and then people see it and will say it's irresponsible, you should not come, you should not promote travel. We have a social media perspective. You can do a dark post on social and just target people who you can on Facebook very easily identify as probably leaning more Republican, either because Facebook identifies them, or they watch Fox and Friends, or they watch Hannity and stuff like that. And maybe your message is safer there in saying, we are ready to welcome you, and avoid some of that backlash. I saw David Kleiman is on this call. He will call me after this and yell at me for saying this. But I think there is something to explore there, where the consumers are coming out of this very different mindset, and it's going to be harder to stay in the middle and please everybody, because you're going to be just caught up in the middle.
I think that's such a brilliant tactic, right? It's really smart, leveraging the tool set the way you described, Facebook dark post and targeting people that way. I think that's a very, very smart one. So that's a super great tip. I do see Katie would love to see a link to that research. So maybe you or somebody from your team, Martin, could drop a link to that.
We have a blog post. We put a blog post up on our website yesterday, and there's links in that also to more of the studies and so on.
That's perfect. We got a great question here. I want to ask you, Kylie, because I know you've got a big Elvis festival coming up. And
We do.
I know this because I'm on your list. And I saw an email that it is now moved to be virtually this year,
That's
right?
correct. That's
So
right.
we got a great question about Tim around, virtual events. And I'm sure that there's been all kinds of conversation around moving events to virtual and virtual tours and different kinds of virtual content. So have you guys in your planning, how are you approaching, this event? And is now moving forward, are you shifting any kind of your budget from a percentage wise or anything like that to towards doing more virtual promotion or virtual events, et cetera?
Yeah, with regards to the Tupelo Elvis Festival, that is streamlined and maintained and directed by our Downtown Main Street Association. Where we came into play during all of this is, which we've not done before, we worked very closely with them on how to continue with the festival, which, by the way, for Tupelo is our largest attending festival. We bring in a ton of international travelers for this particular event. To my surprise, I mean, people in Australia and the UK and Germany will save a lifetime savings worth of money to attend this trip and visit and have that Elvis journey experience. So while it's maintained from them, we lended our support with them on making it a virtual event. So they are doing that. They're spearheading that. We're just lending our support and promoting it to our Elvis segment group in that email blast. And doing what we can, our due diligence on promoting it and lending our support to them. But really, that's taken on by them. And moving forward, we actually had a big July. So this year's our, and I hope I say this right, sesquicentennial in July. And that originally we had a big launch for that. We've since kind of punted on it, if you will, but we are looking, our mayor still wants to hold this July 25th street event, and that will be live, assuming that our executive orders will be lifted by 1st of June. That might look different than what we anticipated before March, but so really the only virtual event we have is Elvis Festival. I mean, we don't want to lose that audience. We certainly don't want to lose that spot on the calendar as well. So we're just really lending our support to them and giving creative feedback to them and pushing this.
Gotcha. So we there's a couple questions around this that have been submitted by Emily and Tim, and as a kind of follow up on what we're talking about, I'd love to kind of throw this to you guys and have all of you, kind of give some feedback here. But certainly, there's nobody representing a destination or attraction that's attending right now, that's watching this, that wants to get caught. You know what I mean? In a way, publicly, in a negative light, right? I mean, we all try to struggle both politically inside our destination and then certainly look to attract visitors from outside. But now we're in this little bit of a difficult place where we may be locally, they may not be ready for us to be trying to attract outsiders, especially outside visitors from, harder hit areas, right? Or things like that. There's just, it's a little gray. It's a little difficult. And then it's thinking about just the publicity of stakeholders that maybe aren't following guidelines, right? Maybe Martin, to your point, they lean way to the right and they're like, to hell with this, we're going to do our own thing, or whatever it is, right? How do you do this? How do you advise a destination to kind of steward their brand through those kind of scenarios? Steve, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, this has happened on a handful of clients already have facing this dilemma. Could you imagine if a visitor is comfortable enough to visit your destination and people are holding up signs telling them to go home? This is happening. This is actually happening in a destination, right? It has been as recently as this past week. Our advice is ask. Stop and ask. You have two primary audiences that you should be asking this question. Are you ready for us? Because we are part of the economy, right? DMOs, we're part of the economy. So you should ask residents, are you ready for us to start telling people to come visit? for a lot of us, especially that have, some high density areas created by tourism, your goal right now, if most of you are mirroring the strategy of you want the residents out locally to keep the businesses alive, or you're not going to have tourism product to promote down the road. But are locals going to do that if they think it's going to be swamped full of visitors? The only way to know is to ask them. And then you also need to ask your stakeholders. And then it might be conflicting data, by the way. But I think you have to have that data to make an accurate decision, including, according to you all, the awkward decisions. But I wouldn't guess at it. And you need, as a person responsible for bringing people to community, have a tourism-friendly environment is top priority. If they're telling them to go away, you might be eager to tell people to visit, but they'll never come back if they're told to not, if they're made to not feel welcome. And I think that's very, very important.
I feel like I just witnessed a little micro moment. I got goosebumps, Steve. You're up there, man. I love it. I love it. I love it. You're so good at this stuff. I love it, man. Martin, what about you?
Yeah, I think this is like a challenge that the DMOs have not faced to that extent before. To Steve's point, that you really have part of the local population in some cases who are really opposed to people from out of town visiting. I think the DMOs that have over the last years worked very hard on explaining to local stakeholders the economic impact story and the benefits of tourism, I think will do better in this, or benefit from that. I think there's also the stuff that tourism related businesses do and communicate around how they make the visitors experience safer is also one that works to reassure locals that those visitors are not being a threat to the local community, right? And so when we talk to clients, the conversations that we're having now that like were unthinkable 6 weeks ago, or maybe even 4 weeks ago, is to say, how do you go in and update your website and asset library that when you have photos of hotels, you see the front desk and the front desk agent is wearing a face mask and there's a big jar of hand sanitizer, very visible. So even if you don't, actively talk about it, you can still reassure people that you acknowledge what is happening and you are putting measures in place that hopefully will contain this and make travel as safe as possible. So I think the need to reach out from a DMO to those local groups and explaining what is done to make everybody's experience safe as possible is really, really important. But we also see in the data that there's just some people who you will not convince that this is a good idea. And it's not about traveling itself. Is it safe or not safe? It's not about the people who are coming, because it is purely a political issue where people are digging in just on the matter of principle. And I don't think there's an easy answer to overcome that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree. The last thing I would want, right, is for any of us, I know we're probably all aligned here, is suggest there is some kind of easy answer here to something that is very complex. That's for sure. Elizabeth, you got a great question that you're asking, is how would you go about doing this? And certainly, Steve chimed in there for us all, but this is a great opportunity. We know with our clients at Streetsense, we've had a few, like Fairfax, Virginia, for example, that kind of struggled a little bit with their, didn't have great access to their locals, in other words. So in attempting to do this, right, through some of the product development and other things, they've been able to develop those channels, which they need, and now they're able to create these ambassadors through that, so they could leverage them in messaging, Kylie, like you were talking about earlier. So certainly social media, throw little dollars behind targeting local, send that traffic to a Google form, conduct the survey, capture the email address, do an opt-in, right, and build your list. That's a really fantastic way. If you need help with that survey, certainly any of us on the call here would be willing to help you with that and how to conduct that. But Kylie, as you think about your demographics, we got a great question from Jackie here. So glad you're joining, Jackie. I miss you, my friend. But this is a great question. As you are thinking about the demographics for your destination, and I'm sure all of us on the call are processing the same thing. We know that just like there's probably a political divide within our audience, there's demographic divides, and we probably see some that are going to be quicker to travel because they don't view themselves as at much risk, right? And others might go, oh, I'm a little more cautious, right?
Right.
And so as you're thinking, are you crafting different brand messaging to different demographics, or how are you exactly thinking through that on the marketing side?
Well, that's a good question. We have a staff of 12, each dedicated. I'm director of marketing. We have a dedicated in-market strategist, PR director, et cetera. And prior to this, we always managed everything in-house, from creative and brand messaging and how we push and serve that content. But in this particular situation, we realized we needed to send out an RFQ to help craft that. And so that's what we did. We recently, a couple of weeks ago, put out an RFQ. We wanted to collaborate with an ad agency to help with this, because I think it's just sort of beyond our not realm or expertise, but I just think that it's in this particular situation, it's not like our 2014 tornado where it affected us. This is a global effect on everybody. And so what will that message be? What will that new conversation be? And we reached out to partner with an ad agency to help develop and reposition our brand messages, and figure out, what that will look like. So right now, as we stand, that RFQ's been sent out. We've vetted out, some potential agencies that we hope to have an answer on, so we can move quickly when the executive order is lifted, in combination with this 30, 90-day recovery plan. That, by the way, as soon as we went dark, this is, and seized all of our media, that was our first call to action as a team, was to create a 30, 90-day recovery plan. So we did that quickly, swiftly, so that when we do go live, that place is in plan and we can activate it. We just needed some help with the ad agency to help craft that new message and create those new conversations.
I love that you mentioned that, and Steve, you hit on this too a second ago by just by asking. I think I have heard from the calls that I've been on with destinations is there is so much unknown. Everything is changing, right? There's a great question here too, even about how is, potential number of positive cases or number of deaths, et cetera, inside of our destinations, is that affect how trustworthy our brand can be perceived and stuff like that. And so the simple thing to know that if you're on the call, asking for help is not a sign of weakness, first of all. Asking for help to, an ad agency, in that case, Kylie, I love that you bring that up and mention that. Certainly that's at Streetsense with the accelerator that we have. That's one of the strengths that we've got and that we love doing, and coming alongside, destinations of all kinds of sizes and thinking through exactly this right here, right? And solving these kind of problems. But it can be isolating a little bit when you don't know, right? And so, Martin, what are you thinking about with your clients and your destinations in handling? I mean, certainly you're in the backyard there with Oregon, right, and in Portland. So, how are you kind of thinking that trustworthy divide and the potential impact that could have on the brand?
Yeah, I think it's too early to really know, but I think we can make some safe assumptions, sort of that. Once the stay-at-home bans are lifted, it's not that the crisis is going to be over or it's not going to come back. I mean, every expert that you look at says there's most likely a wave scenario and there will be regional differences. And I absolutely think that potential visitors will take a look at how they perceive the destination they're considering for a trip. I mean, you even see it now when you look at some research that Destination Analysts has done with how likely are you visiting the following destinations, and places like New York, New Orleans, or Detroit that have been heavier hit, have seen a bigger dip than in potential visitation than others. So again, I don't think there is necessarily something a DMO itself can do, because the virus will go where it goes. I mean, everybody should do their part to try and contain this as much as you can. And then again, it's about communicating what is being done. And that's the universal theme that we see in our research and the sentiment analysis. People want to know want to see that you acknowledge that this is a new situation and what are you doing about it. And to Steve's point, it doesn't mean you now have to be the health authority. It can be that you are the one who points to the health authority, but to pretend that like business is normal and nothing has changed, it's an illusion. Like this is not the mindset that consumers have at the moment. They are looking for completely different things, and they're also considering completely different destinations than what they did in January.
Yeah, and that's really huge. Steve, earlier we had, a question around this, and I don't know if we touched on it. I think it may have been in the chat, but last week I had a great panel around influencers, and some of the suggestions from influencers there were leverage your influencers that you probably have had a relationship with in the past to be maybe agents of communicating some of these messages. What do you think about that suggestion? And what do you think about leveraging more of our stakeholders and locals to be some of the agents of that messaging that consumers are looking for right now?
Yeah, I think you directed that towards me.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think what we're finding out is that it's not an option, but destination brands have to be 360-degree brands. There's, Kylie and I thought it was kind of a pretty cool conversation the other day but I thought it applied to many DMOs in this situation, and that 90% of most of our promotional marketing voice goes to consumers. And stakeholder communication, for the most part, is up to board meetings, seeing about, visiting in the community, and an e-newsletter to our stakeholders. It's about it. And so it's generous to say it typically receives 10% of our communication efforts. So because of that, our 90% voice has always been talking entertainment, fun, blue suede shoes. Might as well keep picking on Kylie here, right?
And taking care of business.
That's right. Peanut butter, banana, all that good fun stuff that goes with it. And all of a sudden, in the last 3 or 4 weeks, 90% or more of our communication efforts, in fact, really all of it, but maybe social media, we miss you type of messaging, most of our communication efforts have been aimed at stakeholders and residents. And we've been doing things that do the one thing that DMOs always, the more I eavesdrop on DMOs, I always hear, I wish our stakeholders trusted us more. I wish we had better relationships. I wish we were at the table more. We can't get their attention. But now, what are we doing? We have messaging of help. We're here to support you. Some of you are out giving goodie bags and packets and feeding people. You're truly helping, and you're creating programs that help take out delivery services and whatnot. And so the trust, relationship building, help, that's all part of your brand also. It's just never been the number one priority until now. Right now, I would encourage all of you, it's okay. Right now, we are investing in our brand. We're building our brand. We're building relationships. So you have the right to go back to the other messaging top of mind down the road.
Absolutely. At 100%.
Preach.
We'll have a call to the altar in about 10 minutes.
As long as we don't pass the plate, right?
Josh, can I just add one thing?
Yes, please.
The question. So I think it goes beyond that. I think there's a huge benefit to looking at past visitors and reaching out to them first. And influencers sort of fall into that category. They're just a special type of past visitor. Because sort of past visitors, in my opinion, have provide several opportunities to a DMO. So one, you have already probably a contact with them, or your local hotels might have them in a database, or they follow you on social media, or you have them on the database. Two, they are familiar with the product and the destination. So, if I look at, do I want to now go to, I don't know, making this up, like Turkey for the first time, if I've never been to Turkey, there's a lot of stuff that I don't know. I'm much more likely to go to a destination where I've been before. And three, I would say 2.5, also repeat visitors might behave less like out-of-towners than other people, which might play better with the locals. But three, and I think that's a really important point, is when you have a repeat visitor and they have been in your destination before, chances are they have positive associations with a time when everything was normal, right? Sort of, which is a super easy button to push with them of saying, think back when you came here last time and the world wasn't a better place, and you can sort of create this everything it's not that bad, you know, there is hope in all this. It feels normal again. So I think to your question on influencers, that is a super low hanging fruit, is repeat visitors. But I also think to the question earlier on how do you target people who are 65 differently than others, I don't know if age is the right, how I would slice it. And I fully admit I have a very strong social media lens on through which I look at the world, but I give you, just shooting from the hip, a couple of other examples of how I think you can look at this. So I talked about people who lean Republican, our indication is more likely to travel. I would look at a campaign and slice it saying, I'm targeting females with kids that are age 3 to 17. And the message is you have had homeschool hell the last weeks, put them in a minivan, summer camps are canceled, and go somewhere where you have parks and museums that are open and stuff like that. And you work that message. Or I talked to a DMO who normally in the Southwest, where it's very hot in the summer, they get really nice hotels that are very cheap. Normally they drive price sensitive people and drive markets. And their point was, maybe the people don't have the money this year to come. My point to them was, you got to look at people who last year got on a plane and flew to Italy or Spain. They're not doing this year. This is an audience you've never marketed to in the summer. And now the message is, instead of going to Barcelona, come and stay in my 5-star resort for $120 a night, right? Or give you another one is healthcare workers. So when you talk to people who work in a hospital about, are they scared to get on an airplane? These people, again, general statement, laugh at you and saying, I'm surrounded by coronavirus all day long. Do you think I'm going to be scared to get on a plane? I need a vacation. Somebody please tell me where to go. So I think to say, do we slice it by age is way too crude. You got to be much more surgical in about who you go after. And each one of those of audiences needs a very specific message because they have a very different motivation that did not exist 6 weeks ago, and you need content and messaging for that. Sorry.
Those are all like really, really good things. I know I was taking several notes, and I think Becca was over there too. I could see you, but you bring up something we've talked about several times over the last 6 weeks together, is being able to think about our data, right? To be able to, in leveraging our data, our owned first-party data, to even identify who has visited. Right? Because that is a great audience that certainly at Streetsense we're leveraging too. But you go, that positive, it's like the positive emotional connection that you can draw on from nostalgia, right? And from things about, now we're moving into this new thing. Well, the things that matter most, right, we now have a greater appreciation for things like precious time, reconnecting with our family, reconnecting with, like this slowdown has all of a sudden, that Will, I think, said this several weeks ago on one of these, but the scarcity has given us greater clarity around the things that matter most. And that for sure is a button we can leverage, as a brand, for sure, right? I love that. I love it. Button we can leverage. I'm going to tweet that, I think, at some point, as well as I'm going to quote Floyd here for saying, being in the age 65 group, we are not AARP. So I definitely, that made me laugh. I love that. We still enjoy adventure, great food, and the craft scene. So I love that. Kylie, we're wrapping up here. We got a few minutes left, but any closing thoughts for us? Anything else you want to add?
No, I mean, I would just suggest, our approach is transparency. That's key for us. I think it was Steve that talked about, the information we are putting out. We're not drafting that script of how to be safe. We're just putting out what CDC and WHO and our CARES Act and our city of Tupelo, our executive orders are doing, but we're doing it in a very transparent way. We're not looking to hide anything. We're not looking to sugarcoat. It is what it is. But we're just trying to promote those safety measures. I would say, transparency, one of the things we're wanting to do, and as we partner with our ad agency is target audience will change. I mean, I think the first one to look at is our locals, and getting them to get that buy-in from them, and have them rally around your brand and what that message will be once we move forward, and let them leverage that championship from them. and get them to be your brand champions. And that's one of the things that is important to us. So, you know, it's definitely the landscape has changed, certainly, but, you know, we're staying in constant contact with our stakeholders, our partners, our community, certainly, to inspire travel down the road. We want to do it from that local influencer ambassadors and really heighten that more so than we've probably done in the past.
Yeah. Steve, any closing thoughts for us?
Yeah, you know, Martin was right. We have to recognize that we are at a different time, and you can't act like nothing's wrong.
Right.
That being said, I also don't think it's necessary you have to remind people where we've been. I'm not saying it wasn't necessary, but we're all done hearing in these unprecedented times. It's unprecedented how many times I've heard that. In these thoughtful times, in times like, we all know, we don't need to remind us. I was funny little jab to that, but I wouldn't use that. I think it's maybe it's most important to remember to stay true to your destination. You still represent fun. You still represent relaxation. You still represent an escape. And if you don't represent those things, you're of no value.
Yeah.
That is what travel's about. That's why we all have confidence that we're going to be able to come back. And so don't forget, it's okay for you to have fun. It doesn't mean ignore and act like nothing's changed. I'm with Martin. But don't forget, you are fun. You are relaxation and those things that are part of your brand messaging. And just stay true to your brand, stay true to your identity and what makes you special. I love the graphics that are going around that show social distancing. This is a good example, right? Lake Charles, Louisiana shows that 18 crawfish are 6 feet of social distancing, right? I think we got how many pairs of blue suede shoes do it. Lexington, Kentucky is a thoroughbred horse, right? They're having fun. They're staying true to themselves. They're not ignorant what's been going on. And I think that's a good example of what we've all got to do moving forward.
That's fantastic. Really, really good stuff. Martin, up to you, my friend.
So I think my closing perspective would be sort of, if you take a step back and you really look at the world as a whole, there has never been anything like this. This is like a disruption on an unprecedented scale. And it can be frustrating. And at the same time, disruption, I think, always creates opportunity. I mean, there is brands, companies, and DMOs who are going to come out of this much better than they were before. And the question is sort of, what does everybody do to position yourself there? And for me, I mentioned it, I think the key is to understand that, and everybody can answer that for themselves, how we look at the world has fundamentally changed. And again, there is opportunity in this. So when you look at all the phases that people have gone through the quarantine, getting frustrated at home, now we are divided about whether we should wear face masks or not. One of the things that we see in the data is that there could be something like the next phase could be we're all looking for lack of a better label, to heal, right? So if I want to go somewhere, I think, I don't know if Steve mentioned it before, or Josh, you mentioned it, sort of, it's not about how many museums do you have in your city or your destination. It's about where do I find time, space, and place to connect with the people who matter to me, or to slow down and take a breather and so on. So if we call this phase healing, and you sort of anticipate, look at it, is it coming, is it not coming? How do you already now adjust your messaging around that to appeal to those people and tell a story on why should they come to your place to experience that?
Oh man, I love this. For the 154 of you that have stayed with us all the way through the end of the hour, man, what an incredible hour. I feel like this time just went by like that. I knew this was going to be a good one. I knew it was going to be great, but thank you for everybody for tuning in. Becca, any closing thoughts for us? Reminders?
Just to echo Josh, thank you all. This was some really great conversation, seeing some lot of positive feedback about just the enthusiasm that our panelists had today. So thank you for that. And just a reminder, check out connecttravel.com/webinars. We've got a great one coming up next week on how destinations are using social media. So it'll be a little more specific focus on that, but we'll certainly answer all the questions that you have. And thank you again for tuning in.
Have a great week. We will see you all next week, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Good job. Team. Man, you brought it.
I talked.
You brought it.
I spoke.
I mean, everybody. That was fantastic. Seriously, I looked up and it was like 45 and I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
I did.
I
A
was
lot of really good perspectives.
I took 2 pages of notes between Kylie and Martin's comments. I'm like, oh, that's good stuff. Yeah.
Yes, I have a lot over here.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
I love it.
That
That's
was
good.
fun. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of
Yeah,
this.
this was awesome.
Absolutely. Yes, we know,
Thank
Laura,
you.
we're live. This is on purpose.
Now we talk about the real stuff. What I did not want to say earlier was.
I know. Yeah, it's good. I love it. All the good comments. Good. This is a good one. A really, really good one. Well, seriously,
Thank you all.
you guys for being on this. Appreciate it. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
agreeing, and we'll see you later.
You bet.
Yeah. Talk soon.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.